My name is Margaret Whitaker. I'm 68 years old, and I learned my son thought I was useless in a glass-walled conference room at First Plains Bank. Not sick, not confused, not grieving, useless. Ryan sat beside me in a navy suit I had helped pay for, tapping a silver pen against a stack of papers thick enough to hide a house inside. My house, as it turned out. The same little white house in Columbus, Ohio, where I had raised him after his father worked double shifts, and I stretched grocery money until payday. The house where I measured his fever with one hand and balanced our checkbook with the other. The house his father, Frank, left protected in a trust before he died. Ryan told me it was just temporary paperwork. A business bridge loan, a technical update, something a mother should sign because her son knew better. Then the bank officer looked me straight in the eye and asked, "Mrs. Whitaker, do you understand that this document would allow your home to be used as collateral for your son's business debt?" I turned to Ryan. He didn't even look ashamed. He sighed, leaned back in his chair, and said the sentence that changed the rest of his life. "Mom, you're too old to matter in this kind of thing. Just sign it." The room went quiet. For a second, I saw him at 7 years old, standing in my kitchen with scraped knees, crying because he thought the world was unfair. I remembered every late bill I paid for him, every emergency check, every "just this once, Mom," every birthday where he hugged me with one arm and asked for money with the other. I didn't cry. Old women are expected to cry when their children humiliate them. We're expected to soften, forgive, explain it away, blame stress, blame pressure, blame ourselves. I did something else. I picked up the pen, capped it, and placed it back on the table. "I'll take these papers home and read them," I said. Ryan's face hardened. "Don't embarrass me." But he had already done that for both of us. 3 hours later, my phone rang while I was sitting at my kitchen table with my husband's old leather folder open in front of me. Ryan was breathing hard. "Mom," he said, "what did you do?" "The bank froze my account." I looked down at the folder Frank had labeled years ago in his careful handwriting. "For Maggie, if Ryan ever asks for the house." Then I said the calmest words I had spoken in 8 years. I finally read the paperwork. Before that morning at the bank, I had spent nearly 40 years believing that love meant making things easier for the people who carried your name. That was how I was raised. That was how I ran my marriage. And God help me, that was how I raised my son. Ryan was my only child. When he was little, he had the softest brown curls and a way of pressing his whole face into my coat when he was tired, as if I were the only safe place in the world. He used to call me from the school nurse's office for every stomachache, every scraped knee, every day that felt too big for him. I always came, even when I had work, even when the laundry was still wet in the washer, even when Frank and I had exactly $27 left until Friday. Frank used to say, "Maggie, that boy knows you'll cross a burning bridge for him." And I would say, "That's what mothers do." Frank never argued with me then. He only looked at me in that quiet way of his, the look that meant he saw farther down the road than I wanted to. We bought our house in 1986, a little white Cape Cod on Elmhurst Drive with cracked front steps and a maple tree that leaned toward the driveway like it was trying to listen. Frank fixed the steps himself. I painted the kitchen cabinets twice. Ryan learned to ride a bike on that sidewalk. Every corner of that house had a memory pressed into it. After Frank died, the house became more than a place to live. It became proof that I had survived the worst day of my life and still had somewhere to wake up the next morning. Ryan knew that. He also knew I would do almost anything to keep peace in the family. The first time he asked me for money, he was 29 and had just started Whitaker Custom Homes. He came over on a rainy Thursday evening, standing in my kitchen with wet hair and a folder under his arm. "Mom, it's not a handout," he said. "It's a short-term bridge, 30 days, maybe 45. "How much?" I asked. He looked down like the number embarrassed him. 7,000. I remember the way he said it, not as a question, more like a confession. So I wrote the check. He hugged me hard and said, "I swear, Mom, I'll pay you back first thing." He did not pay me back first thing. Instead, there was another emergency 2 months later, a supplier problem, then a payroll issue, then a delayed client payment, then a truck repair. The reasons changed, but the shape of them stayed the same. Ryan was always one signature away from disaster, and I was always the person standing closest to the pen. By the time he married Lauren, the requests had become smoother. Lauren was beautiful in the polished way expensive people are beautiful. Perfect hair, perfect nails, perfect photos of family dinners where the food was cold before anyone ate because she needed the lighting right. She called me Mom Whitaker in public and your mother when she spoke to Ryan in another room. I heard her once. They were hosting Thanksgiving, and I had gone down the hall to find the bathroom. Their bedroom door was half open. "Ryan, you cannot keep asking her like this," Lauren whispered. For one small second, I thought she was defending me. Then she added, "You have to make it automatic. She forgets half the things she agrees to anyway." I stood there in the hallway with a folded hand towel in my hands, listening to my daughter-in-law turn my kindness into a banking strategy. Ryan laughed softly. "She doesn't forget, she just doesn't say no." That was the first time I should have stopped. I didn't. Instead, I walked back to the dining room, past the sweet potatoes, and smiled when Lauren asked if I wanted more iced tea. Because old habits do not break loudly. Most of them keep wearing Sunday clothes and pretending they are manners. Then came Emma. My granddaughter was born on a snowy February morning, and the first time I held her, something inside me softened and hurt at the same time. She had Ryan's eyes, Frank's chin, and a grip so strong she wrapped her fingers around mine like she had been waiting for me. After that, Ryan's requests became harder to refuse because they were no longer only about him. "Mom, it's Emma's school deposit. Mom, we're behind on her insurance. Mom, I don't want her to see me fail." That last one always worked because I had spent my whole life making sure Ryan never had to see me fail. So I transferred money. Quietly. Repeatedly. Sometimes $2,000. Sometimes $8,500. Once $23,000 that Ryan said would keep 6 workers paid through Christmas. I never added it all up. People think you avoid numbers because you don't understand them. That was never my problem. I understood numbers very well. I avoided them because I knew they would tell me the truth before I was ready to hear it. On my 68th birthday, Ryan and Lauren invited me to dinner at their house. I thought it was for me. It wasn't. The dining room was full of Ryan's clients, Lauren's friends, and 3 relatives I had not seen since Frank's funeral. There was a cake on the counter with my name spelled in gold icing, but no one cut it for nearly an hour because Ryan was too busy giving a tour of his new kitchen. "Imported stone," Lauren said proudly, running her hand over the island. I smiled. I had paid for that island. I just didn't know it yet. Later, when I asked Ryan quietly whether the last transfer had covered his supplier invoice, his face changed. Not much, just enough. "Mom," he said through his teeth, "not now." I only wanted to make sure. "You're embarrassing me." The word landed harder than it should have. I looked around that bright kitchen at the flowers, the marble, the champagne glasses, the daughter-in-law who would not meet my eyes, and the son who looked at me like I was a problem he had outgrown. That night, I went home with half a birthday cake wrapped in foil and a text from Ryan waiting on my phone. "Need you at First Plains tomorrow. Just signing some family paperwork. Nothing serious." I read it twice. Then I opened the drawer beside Frank's old chair and took out his fountain pen. Because after all those years, some part of me still believed that being needed meant being loved. The next morning, Ryan picked me up 7 minutes late and acted like the lateness belonged to me. He pulled into my driveway in his black SUV, one hand on the wheel, phone pressed between his shoulder and ear, talking to someone about permits, concrete delays, and a client who didn't understand quality. When I opened the passenger door, he barely looked over. "Morning, Mom," he said, covering the phone for half a second. "You bring your ID?" Not hello. Not happy birthday again. Not how did you sleep. Your ID. I settled into the leather seat carefully, smoothing my coat over my knees. The car smelled like new upholstery and coffee. There was a golf club catalog on the console and a stack of invoices shoved between the seats. Ryan drove too fast, one finger steering while he barked into the phone. I watched the streets of Columbus slide past the window and told myself not to be dramatic. That was the word he used when I asked too many questions. Dramatic, sensitive, old-fashioned, confused. Words people use when they want your silence to sound like a personality flaw. First Plains Bank sat on the corner of High Street and West Broad, all polished glass and blue signage. I had banked there since before Ryan could spell his own last name. Frank and I opened our first joint savings account there when the lobby still had brass lamps and a bowl of peppermint candies near the teller window. Ryan parked in the front and came around to open my door, but not in a caring way, in a hurry-up way. "Just follow my lead," he said. I looked at him. "I thought I was only signing family paperwork." "You are. Then why do you need me to follow your lead?" His jaw tightened. "Mom, please. I have a lot riding on this." That was always how he said it, as if pressure excused everything done underneath it. Inside, a bank officer named Denise Walker greeted us. She was younger than me by maybe 20 years, with careful eyes and a neat gray blazer. She shook Ryan's hand first, then mine. "Mrs. Whitaker," she said, "would you like coffee or water before we begin?" Ryan answered for me. "She's fine." I turned to Denise. "Water would be lovely, thank you." It was a small thing, but I saw her notice it. We sat in a glass-walled conference room with a long table and a view of the lobby. Ryan spread the papers out before I even took off my gloves. He had yellow tabs already placed on the signature lines, not the pages I needed to read, just the places my name was supposed to go. "Here," he said, sliding the pen toward me. "These 3 first, then 1 at the back." I picked up the first page. The print was small, but my eyes still worked. Slowly I read the heading. Personal Guarantee Agreement. I looked at Ryan. "Why does this say personal guarantee?" "It's standard." "For whom?" "For the business. Your business." He laughed under his breath, the way people laugh when they want a question to feel foolish. "Our family business, Mom." That was new. When he wanted praise, it was his business. When he wanted collateral, it became family. Denise leaned forward. "Mrs. Whitaker, just so I'm clear, have you reviewed the full loan package with independent counsel?" Ryan's smile thinned. "We don't need counsel. She trusts me." Denise did not look at him. She looked at me. "The collateral schedule includes the Elmhurst Drive property." There it was. My house. Not an idea. Not a vague family asset. My home. Frank's maple tree. My kitchen cabinets. The hallway where Ryan's height marks still lived under 3 coats of paint. I put the page down. "Ryan," I said quietly, "why is my house in your loan documents?" His face changed, only for a second. The mask slipped, and underneath it was irritation, not guilt, because it helps the bank feel secure. "The bank." "Mom, don't start." "I'm asking a question, and I'm telling you this is normal." His voice dropped, but the glass room carried sound better than he thought. "You're making this harder than it has to be." Denise folded her hands. "Mrs. Whitaker has every right to ask questions." That was when Ryan leaned back, rubbed his forehead, and said it. "Mom, you're too old to matter in this kind of thing. Just sign it." The words did not hit me loudly. They settled, like dust on a room after a door has been slammed. For one long moment, I heard nothing but the soft hum of the bank lights. I looked at my son's hand on the table. I remembered that same hand clutching mine when he was 5 and afraid of thunder. I remembered packing his lunches, paying his registration fees, lying awake beside Frank, whispering about how to give Ryan more than we'd had. And now he was sitting in a bank, asking me to risk the only home I had left, while explaining to strangers that I no longer counted. I capped Frank's fountain pen. Ryan blinked. "What are you doing?" "I'm taking the papers home." His face flushed. "Mom, if they're honest papers, they'll still be honest tomorrow." "Do not embarrass me." I stood slowly, buttoned my coat, and picked up the folder. "No, Ryan," I said. "I think you already handled that." He did not drive me home. I took a taxi, and for the first time in 8 years, when my son called, I let it ring. The taxi dropped me in front of my house at 11:42 a.m. I remember the time because I looked at the clock on the stove when I walked into my kitchen, still holding Ryan's loan papers against my chest like something poisonous. The house was quiet, in that deep old way houses get when they have held a family for too long. The refrigerator hummed. The maple branches scratched lightly against the window. Frank's chair sat in the corner with the reading lamp still angled the way he liked it. For a moment I wanted him so badly I had to put one hand on the counter. Not because I couldn't handle Ryan, because Frank had known. I could feel it before I even opened the drawer beside his chair. That old, stubborn part of my husband had seen the road before I did and left me a sign in the dark. The drawer stuck the way it always did. Inside were things I had not touched in months. Frank's reading glasses, a tin of cough drops, a deck of playing cards, and beneath them his brown leather folder. I had seen that folder before. I had dusted around it, moved it once or twice. But I had never opened it because grief makes strange rules, and one of mine was that Frank's private papers stay private as long as I could pretend I did not need them. That morning, I needed them. The folder smelled faintly of paper, leather, and the peppermint gum Frank used to chew after dinner. On top was an envelope with my name written in his careful block letters. Maggie. Just that. I sat down before I opened it. The letter was only one page, but it took me nearly 20 minutes to read because I had to stop after the first sentence. If you are reading this, sweetheart, Ryan has asked for the house. My hands went cold. Frank had written the letter 6 months before he died. He said he loved our son, but love had never required blindness. He had seen the way Ryan spoke about money, the way emergencies gathered around him like weather, the way every problem became someone else's moral test. Then came the line that broke me. Ryan does not borrow money from you, Maggie. He borrows your fear that saying no makes you a bad mother. I folded the letter against my chest and closed my eyes. That was the part no one had ever said out loud. Not Lauren. Not Ryan. Not the relatives who praised me for being generous whenever my generosity benefited them. Ryan was not taking from my wallet first. He was taking from the little frightened place inside me that still believed a mother had to be useful to be loved. Beneath the letter were copies of our trust documents, the deed to the house, a list of accounts, and a yellow legal pad covered in Frank's handwriting. Down the left side, he had written dates. Down the right, amounts. $7,000, Ryan said supplier delay. $4,800, Ryan said payroll. $12,500, Ryan said truck repair. $23,000, Ryan said Christmas wages. $18,750, Ryan said Emma's tuition. Frank had been tracking it, every check, every transfer, every excuse I had repeated to him at the kitchen table while he listened quietly and said almost nothing. At the bottom of the page, Frank had written one sentence and underlined it twice. Do not let him turn your home into his last line of credit. I sat there until the afternoon light shifted across the table. Then I did what I had done for 31 years at First Plains Bank before I retired. I followed the paper. I opened my laptop, logged into my accounts, and downloaded 8 years of statements. Not just the checking account, savings, Frank's life insurance account, the emergency fund, the small investment account I had promised myself I would use for travel one day and never did. The printer began to spit pages onto the kitchen table, page after page. The total did not arrive all at once. That would have been kinder. It built itself slowly, line by line, until the number sat in front of me with the calm cruelty of arithmetic. $312,400. That was what I had given Ryan in 8 years, not lent. Given, because there were no promissory notes, no repayment schedules, no signatures from him, only text messages full of urgency and a mother who kept saving him from the consequences of being a grown man. But the unauthorized transactions were worse. There were monthly transfers I did not remember approving, a vendor payment that led to Lauren's kitchen renovation, a business equipment deposit that matched the exact amount of a luxury bathroom remodel she had posted online with the caption, "Hard work pays off." Hard work. Mine, apparently. At 2:17 p.m., I called the number Frank had written on the inside pocket of the folder. Judith Marino answered on the third ring. "Mrs. Whitaker," she said, as if she had been expecting me for years. I looked at Frank's letter on the table. "My son tried to use my house as collateral this morning." There was no gasp, no drama, just a long professional silence. Then Judith said, "Did you sign anything?" "No." "Good. Then we still have time." 20 minutes later, Judith had called First Plains Bank. 40 minutes later, Denise Walker called me directly to confirm that I wanted all pending loan documents involving my property paused, all third-party access reviewed, and any related business accounts flagged until authorization could be verified. I asked her if that meant Ryan's company account might be affected. Denise's voice softened. "Mrs. Whitaker, if your property was used or represented without proper authorization, the bank is required to freeze certain activity during review." I looked at the folder. "Then review it." 3 hours after my son told me I was too old to matter, my phone rang. Ryan's name filled the screen. I answered on the fourth ring. His voice was sharp with panic. "Mom, what did you do?" "The bank froze my account." I ran my fingers over Frank's handwriting. "I finally read the paperwork," I said. For the first time in my life, Ryan had no answer. Ryan came to my house that evening like a man arriving at a fire he expected someone else to put out. I saw his headlights sweep across the living room wall before I heard the tires in the driveway. He did not knock. He used the spare key I'd given him years ago, the one hidden under the ceramic frog by the porch steps, and walked straight into my house with his phone in his hand and panic dressed up as anger. "Mom," he snapped, "you need to call the bank right now." I was at the kitchen table, Frank's folder closed beside my tea. I looked at the spare key in his hand. "You can leave that on the counter." He blinked. "What?" "The key." His mouth opened, then shut. For the first time, I saw him understand that something small and familiar had changed. He tossed the key onto the counter harder than necessary. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Payroll is tomorrow. I have a supplier threatening to walk. A client is calling every 10 minutes. Rive, you froze my entire company." "No," I said. "The bank froze activity while they verify authorization. Don't talk to me like a teller." That almost made me smile. Not because it was funny, but because he had forgotten who taught him what a bank account was. Ryan paced my kitchen, the same kitchen where he had done third-grade homework while I packed his lunch for the next day. His shoes clicked against the floor Frank had installed himself. Everything about him looked expensive and temporary. "I was handling it," he said. I folded my hands around my mug. "By putting my house inside your loan. It was collateral, not a sale. It was my home. It would have helped everyone." I looked at him then. Everyone. He looked away first. That was when I knew the paperwork was worse than even Judith had guessed. Ryan did not avoid a question unless the answer had teeth. He leaned over the table, lowering his voice. "You don't understand business pressure. You never did. Dad worked a job. You worked behind a desk. This is different." "Your father worked until his hands swelled at night," I said, "and I balanced numbers for 31 years. Don't confuse quiet work with small work." His face hardened. "There, that's exactly what I mean. You're getting emotional." I laughed once, softly. He hated that. "I'm not emotional, Ryan. I'm documented." The word landed between us like a third person entering the room. His eyes moved to Frank's folder. "What is that? Your father's papers." Something flickered across his face. Not grief. Fear. "Dad's been dead 4 years. And somehow he's still prepared better than you did." Ryan's jaw tightened. "You're enjoying this." "No," I said. "That's the difference between us. You thought my money was something to enjoy. I thought it was something to protect." For a second, he looked like the boy I remembered, hurt, cornered, needing me. And I felt the old reflex rise in me so fast it almost scared me. The urge to soften my voice, to say, "It's all right," to call the bank and make it go away, to save him from the cliff he had walked toward with his eyes open. Then my phone buzzed on the table. A message from Emma. "Grandma, are you mad at Dad? He says you're trying to make us lose the house." I stared at the words until they blurred. Ryan saw my face and knew exactly what I had read. He did not look ashamed. "Emma is scared," he said. "No," I said quietly. "Emma is being used." His expression shifted. Defensive now. Smaller. "She deserves to know what's happening. She is 12. She's part of this family. She is a child, and I'm your son." There it was, the oldest hook in the world. Not love, not apology, ownership. I stood slowly and picked up my phone. "Ryan, you need to leave." He stared at me. "Are you serious?" "Yes." "You're choosing paperwork over your own child?" I walked to the front door and opened it. "No, I'm choosing the truth over the version of motherhood where I keep paying for your lies." His face darkened in a way I had only seen once before, years ago when Frank told him no on a loan. It was not sadness. It was the rage of a man who believed a door built for him had no right to close. "You think you're in control because some lawyer scared you," he said. "But everyone is going to see what this really is." "And what is that?" He stepped onto the porch. "You're old, Mom. You're confused. You don't understand what you're ruining." I held the door with one hand. "Then I suppose everyone should see the papers." He laughed, but it was too sharp to be real. "Fine. Sunday. My house. Family meeting. We'll clear this up." I knew what he meant. He would fill a room with relatives, speak first, speak loudly, and turn my caution into incompetence. Lauren would pour coffee and look wounded. Someone would say I was aging. Someone else would suggest power of attorney. They would make concern sound like a cage. "All right," I said. Ryan paused. He had expected resistance. I gave him none. After he left, I locked the door and moved the ceramic frog from the porch into the trash. Then I called Judith Moreno. "He wants a family meeting," I said. Judith was quiet for a beat. "Do you want to avoid it?" I looked at Frank's folder on the table, at the printed transfers, at Emma's message still glowing on my phone. "No," I said. "He wants an audience." I opened the folder and touched Frank's letter. "So I'm going to give him one." Sunday afternoon, I put Frank's leather folder into my purse and drove myself to Ryan's house. I did not wear my church dress. I did not wear pearls. I wore black slacks, a gray sweater, and the winter coat Frank bought me on our last anniversary. If Ryan wanted to make me look like a confused old woman, I had no interest in helping him with the costume. There were 6 cars in his driveway when I arrived. Of course there were. Ryan had not invited family for peace. He had invited witnesses. Lauren opened the door before I knocked. She wore soft beige, the color people wear when they want to look innocent in photographs. Her eyes dropped to my purse, then lifted to my face. "Maggie," she said too gently. "We're all just worried about you." "No," I said. "You're all worried the bank asked questions." Her smile twitched. Inside, the living room had been arranged like a small courtroom. Ryan stood near the fireplace with one hand in his pocket. My sister-in-law, Carol, sat on the couch with her husband. 2 cousins stood by the kitchen island. Emma was halfway up the stairs in socks, pretending not to listen. I hated Ryan for that most of all. He had put his daughter within earshot of a fight he planned to win. "Mom," Ryan began, using a voice I had never heard from him before. Slow, careful, public. "Thank you for coming. We all love you, and no one wants this to get uglier." That was how I knew it was already ugly. Lauren placed a folder on the coffee table. "We think," she said, "that with your age and after everything you've been through since Frank passed, it might be time to simplify things." Carol nodded. "There's no shame in needing help, Maggie." I looked at the folder. "What kind of help?" Ryan stepped forward. "Temporary power of attorney, just until we sort out this bank mess." I almost laughed. Temporary. That was the word he used for everything he never intended to give back. He slid the papers toward me. "If you sign this, I can talk to First Plains directly, get the freeze lifted, and stop this before my company gets hurt." "Your company," I said. His jaw flexed. "Our family's future." "No, Ryan, my house was your company's future. That's why the account is frozen." The room shifted. People looked at him, then at me. Ryan's voice sharpened. "Mom, don't do this." "Do what?" "Act like you understand things you don't." There it was. The setup, the line he had been walking toward since I entered the house. He turned to the room. "This is exactly what I've been dealing with. She's confused. She sees banking language and thinks everyone is attacking her. She doesn't understand how modern financing works." Then he looked at me and said it again, softer this time, as if pity made cruelty cleaner. "You're too old to matter in this kind of thing." I nodded, not because I agreed, because he had finally said it in front of everyone. I opened my purse and took out one printed page. "No speech," I said, "just numbers." Ryan's eyes went to the paper, and for the first time that afternoon, real fear moved across his face. I placed the page on the coffee table. "This is every dollar I transferred to Ryan or his company over the last 8 years. $312,400. Carol sat forward. Lauren whispered, "That's not." I placed a second page beside it. "This is the $23,000 Ryan told me was for Christmas payroll. It cleared the same week Lauren's kitchen contractor was paid." Lauren went pale. I placed a third page down. "This is the $41,500 labeled equipment deposit. It went to Lakeview Interiors, the bathroom remodel." Ryan took one step toward the table. "Stop!" I looked at him. "I did. That's why we're here." Before he could speak, the doorbell rang. Ryan froze. Lauren looked at him. "Who is that?" "I invited someone," I said. Judith Moreno walked in wearing a navy coat and carrying a slim briefcase. Beside her was Denise Walker from First Plains Bank. The room went completely silent. Judith nodded once to me, then addressed the room. Mrs. Whitaker asked me to be present because documents were being presented to her today that may affect her legal and financial rights. Ryan's face flushed dark red. This is a private family matter. Denise looked at him calmly. Mr. Whitaker, once a bank account is frozen for review involving questionable authorization, it is no longer only a family matter. Carol turned to Ryan. Questionable authorization? Judith opened her briefcase and removed a copy of the trust. Frank Whitaker placed the Elmhurst Drive property in a protected trust before his death. Maggie has lifetime residential rights. The property cannot be pledged against Ryan Whitaker's business debt without strict independent verification. Ryan pointed at me. She agreed, Denise answered before I could. We have not found valid authorization for the collateral representation. That is why the business account remains frozen. Emma made a small sound on the stairs. Ryan heard it. His face changed, but not with shame, with anger. You did this to your own son? He said. I looked at him, and all the years moved through me at once. The checks, the excuses, the birthdays, the emergency calls, the way he'd reduced my life to a signature line. No, Ryan, I said. I stopped letting my son do this to me. He looked around the room, searching for someone to rescue him. No one moved. I picked up Frank's folder and stood. You said I was too old to matter. Maybe you were right. I am too old to keep paying for a man who only remembers I'm his mother when the bank says no. Then I turned toward the stairs. Emma, sweetheart, none of this is your fault. Her eyes filled with tears. I walked to the door with Judith beside me. Behind us, Ryan's phone buzzed on the coffee table. A notification lit the screen. Business account restriction extended pending investigation. For once, my son had no money to hide behind, and no mother left to sign it back open. Ryan called me 27 times in the first 2 days. I know because my phone counted them with the same indifferent accuracy a bank uses when it counts debt. 27 missed calls, 11 voicemails, 4 texts that moved through every stage of a man realizing the door he had been pushing against for years had finally locked from the inside. Call me. This is serious. You're going to destroy everything I built. Please don't do this to Emma. That last one almost got me. Almost. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee gone cold beside me and read the message 3 times. Then I placed the phone face down next to Frank's folder and reminded myself of the truth Ryan kept hoping I would forget. I had not dragged Emma into this. He had. Judith handled every call after that. She sent Ryan one formal letter explaining that all communication regarding the bank review, the trust, and any financial documents involving my name had to go through her office. It was only 3 paragraphs long, but it did what 8 years of my pleading never had. It made Ryan stop treating my kindness like an unlocked door. The bank's review took 6 weeks. During that time, I learned more about my son's life than he had ever intended me to know. His company was not thriving. It had been floating for years on delayed payments, personal loans, vendor extensions, and my quiet transfers. The black SUV was leased. The office furniture was financed. The new kitchen Lauren had called the result of hard work had been paid for with money Ryan told me was going to payroll. The account freeze did not destroy his business. It revealed that the business had been standing on borrowed flooring for a very long time. Ryan had to sell the SUV. He moved his office back into the converted garage behind his house. 2 employees left. One supplier sued for unpaid invoices. None of that made me happy. I want that understood. There is a kind of grief people do not talk about, the grief of watching your child face consequences you spent your whole life trying to prevent. It hurts. It still hurts. But hurt is not always a sign you made the wrong choice. Sometimes it is just the sound of an old pattern breaking. Lauren texted me once, "You could have handled this privately." I stared at that sentence for a long while, then typed back, "I did, for 8 years." She never replied. Emma came to see me 3 Saturdays after the family meeting. Lauren dropped her off without coming inside. My granddaughter stood on the porch in a blue hoodie holding her backpack with both hands. "Grandma," she asked, "are we poor now?" I swallowed carefully. "No, sweetheart, your father is learning what things cost when someone else stops paying for them." She came inside and sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Ryan used to do homework. The same table where Frank had written the letter that saved my house. I made grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. Emma ate quietly at first, then asked if she could see Grandpa Frank's picture. I took it down from the shelf and handed it to her. "He knew Dad would do this?" she asked. "He knew your father struggled with money," I said, "and he knew I struggled with saying no." Emma ran her thumb along the edge of the frame. "Dad says you chose the bank over us." I sat beside her. "No, I chose not to let the bank take my home because your father used my name where it didn't belong." She nodded slowly, too young to carry all of it, but old enough to understand that adults sometimes call a boundary betrayal when it costs them something. Before she left, she hugged me hard. "I'm glad you didn't lose your house," she whispered. "That was the first time I cried. Not at the bank. Not at the family meeting. Not when Ryan shouted, or when Lauren smiled through lies, or when I saw the total of everything I had given away. I cried because a 12-year-old child had said the thing every adult in that room should have said first: the trust held. Frank had made sure of that. Elmhurst Drive remained mine for as long as I lived, and after me it would pass into a protected fund for Emma's education and future housing. Ryan could not touch it. Lauren could not decorate it. No business loan could swallow it whole. As for Ryan, we are not repaired. Stories like this do not end with violins and perfect apologies. He came by once in November, stood on my porch and said I was under pressure. I said, so was I. He looked older then, smaller. I didn't think you'd check. That was the closest he came to honesty. I told him, when you are ready to apologize for what you did, not for getting caught, I will listen. Then I closed the door gently. A year later, my house is quiet again. But it is a different kind of quiet. Not the silence of waiting for someone to need me. Not the silence after another check clears. This quiet belongs to me. On my 69th birthday, Emma gave me a card she drew herself. On the front was my little white house with the maple tree leaning over the driveway. Inside, in purple marker, she had written, "Grandma, you matter to me." I put that card beside Frank's photograph in the old leather folder. Ryan once said I was too old to matter. He was wrong. I was old enough to remember every dollar, every signature, every excuse, and every door I had left open for people who only entered when they needed something. The day the bank froze my son's account, people said I ruined him. I didn't. I simply stopped letting him use my life as collateral. And that was the day mine finally became my own again.